This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Everybody Lies, Massive Late Fees, House MD show. We're covering House MD. And that's about it. I guess I should tell you right up front because you're supposed to do it up front. That's what I hear. You can write to us at massivelatefee@gmail.com. You can find us at Massive Late Fee on Twitter, Massive Late Fee Facebook. You know where to find us. And we do several different things. We do dumpster diving, which comes out every Friday. We do this show, which comes out Saturday. And we do the main show, Massive Late Fee, which comes out every Thursday, where we talk about streaming properties. But this is House, which is now is streaming in reruns. But obviously originally appeared on Fox. I remember when I first started watching this.
Oh, it's streaming on Amazon Prime, we should mention.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon Prime. And when I first started watching this again, the show, I noticed on YouTube TV, I think it's still also on YouTube TV, although it might be exclusively on Amazon Prime now, but it had NBC in the corner. And I watched the show when it was on Fox, when it was first airing, and I remember thinking, What? Like, NBC doesn't own this? What are you talking? Or like, didn't air this? What are you talking about? And then I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh, that's right. Fox sold like all their shit to Disney. I mean, not everything, but they sold a bunch of stuff to Disney, with the exception of the news channel and the regular broadcast channel and some other properties that they kept for themselves. But they sold most of their movies and everything. And I said, I bet when they did that, they sold some other stuff too, and lo and behold, it is correct. They sold the rights to House to NBC Universal, so NBC Universal owns the rights to House now.
That's funny, they just slapped their logo on it. That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah,
I can see
weird.
removing the other logo, but I don't know. Maybe, I guess it is theirs at this point, so.
Yeah, it's weird.
I don't know. I wonder how much they sold it for. Did they say?
Oh, no, I'm not sure exactly how much it was, but it was a popular show. I have to imagine it went for at least a decent amount.
Yeah, it's one of those shows that you could, like, it's, they're episodic. It's not really, like, there's a kind of a current running through all of them, but, it's got a nice monster. Like, I don't think the X-Files probably could have done, like, that perfectly, where they had, because the episode, they basically had, like, the conspiracy episodes that were tied into the bigger UFO conspiracy at the end. And then they had, like, Monster of the Week episodes, but, like, House really successfully kind of puts the two together.
Yeah.
I mean, mostly it's about, like, the disease of the week or whatever, but, I mean, there are developments in the character and that sort of thing. So this episode's called Damned If You Do, I believe.
That's correct.
Or it's called Damned If You... It's either Damned If You Do or Damned If You Don't. I don't remember which one it's called.
I'm pretty sure it's Damned If You Do.
Okay.
But I guess it could go either way. Either way would make sense.
Sure.
But yeah, so this episode, it's funny. I think this is the first episode, unless you want to count the paternity episode, because of, like, technically they did come into the clinic, but it's not the same thing because they wrote him a letter looking for his consultation. But this is like the first episode where a clinic case, something that starts out purely in the clinic, actually becomes the case of the week.
Great.
And that happens a couple times throughout the course of the series.
Sure. Yeah, so we start off a group of nuns, and I'm not super familiar with, like, the different orders of nuns and stuff, but they seem to be the type that are isolated at a monastery for, like, with, like, no modern conveniences, that sort of thing, and I guess they claim that they, like, basically pray all day.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Like, I know the woman's called Augustine, but I don't know what kind of order, if it's based off a real type of monk or something like that.
So I'm trying to think...
Not monk, I'm sorry, nun.
Right. I'm trying to think of the habit that they were wearing. So,
by the way, I just have to say this. I can't say this enough. Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit is the best sequel title I've ever heard my entire life.
It really is great.
It's perfect. I mean, it's not a good movie, but it's the best. Whoever, if there was an Emmy for movie titles, that should win it every year.
You know what I realized too once when we
Sister Act 2?
when we were doing Retro Late Fee, because at the end of Retro Late Fee, we do our Blockbuster Pick of the Week. And it was my Blockbuster Pick of the Week one week. And I remember talking about how I didn't, as I was talking about how it was coming to Blockbuster, I talked about how I didn't love it. And there were things about it I didn't like. And then I kind of went through the plot real quick. And I realized in the middle of doing that basically the plot of it is School of Rock. and so I sort of like, I said, I think this movie would have been better and funnier if you changed some things about it. And then I basically just changed it to be School of Rock. So, I kind of use that as a joke. But as I was going through it, I was like, fuck, that is just School of Rock.
Yeah, it's weird when you see a movie obviously Fast and the Furious is a complete ripoff of Point Break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're just like, I don't know, are they race car drivers or something in that? I don't know. Well, they're like drag racers or something.
Yeah, they go to race wars. There's a bunch of race wars.
Oh no,
that's what they call their racing thing.
Charlie was right.
Oh god.
But yeah, so it's kind of weird when you notice that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so this nun lady shows up and she's got like her hands are like peeling or something like that. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, she has a really bad like rash, and then like you said, there's definitely some dermatitis going on those hands.
Yeah, that's what he diagnoses it as, dermatitis, and then he gives her I don't know, some medicine, Provenol.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's some sort of antihistamine.
Propecia? Yeah, some kind of antihistamine. And then she starts like having like an allergic reaction to it. Mm. So he and I don't think this is actually the case. I certainly hope not. But he just has a drawer that's not locked or secured anyway, and there's just like dozens of like pre-prepared syringes full of epinephrine.
Yeah.
Or is it norepinephrine?
I think it's just epinephrine.
Yeah, so it's like an adrenaline type shot because like she's like I don't know if they give people adrenaline shots if they start having a reaction like that.
Well,
but I guess if it's to an antihistamine.
Yeah, epinephrine is basically just what you would use to counteract the effects of an allergic reaction. It doesn't necessarily it doesn't actively fight an allergic reaction, but like if someone's airways are closing up. That's what it's used for is to prevent that from happening, basically.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy because like my wife actually had a reaction similar to that. She took like a Cipro for something. Mm-hmm. Like they just prescribed that one for some reason, and then she started going into like like she got hives immediately, and she was having trouble breathing. So we rushed to like the urgent care, and then like they gave her like Benadryl, and that fixed it. So that'd be so weird if like that actually made it worse. I don't know what you even do.
Yeah, well, there's like they do. There's other things that you can do because eventually. So yeah, he gives her the epinephrine, and he says, "This is one of my favorite lines." It's a very very simple line, but this is one of my favorite lines of this episode because it's so creepy the way it's not what you want to hear in the doctor's office. So. She says, am I supposed to feel this, is my heart supposed to feel this funny after he gives it to her? And he goes, it increases your heart rate, it makes your heart beat fast. That's normal. And then he listens to it with a stethoscope and he goes, not this fast.
It's where he's like, get a nurse.
It's just so terrible. So yeah, she starts going into cardiac arrest. And they have to I can't remember what they do, but they do something to fix that. I think
I don't remember.
I maybe they use paddles, I guess. So
they don't show actually. I think they cut to her being like hospital bed in the ICU or something. I assume she's not in the clinic anymore.
That's one of the things that this show gets wrong every once in a while is that in general. When someone has a flat line on their EEG, you don't shock them. Like you use the paddles to get someone that's in an abnormal sinus rhythm back into a normal sinus rhythm. But if they have no sinus rhythm, then paddles usually don't work. There are a couple kinds of flat lines that you can use paddles for. But for the most part, you use drugs to counteract that use different sort of pressors and stuff like that to counteract flat lines. But obviously the paddles are more dramatic, so that they use that more often than they probably should. But like you said, they cut, and maybe that's part of the reason they cut is because they were like, it's not just having him inject her with something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they cut and they put her on. They put her on. It's not prednisone, but it's the steroids. They put her on steroids.
I thought it was prednisone. Actually.
Maybe it was prednisone, but they put her on some.
That's
kind
what
of
I was trying to
steroids.
think of earlier.
But yeah, they put her on. Yeah, go ahead.
I know because don't they at this point they think it's allergy still? I don't remember what they thought it was.
I'm trying to think because some of them think it's an allergy because
they thought she had encephalitis. Isn't that what it was?
Well, that comes a little bit later. But yeah, I'm trying to think what they think initially because the big argument is she had the cardiac arrest and Cuddy says because you gave her 1 gram of epinephrine and he said no, I gave her 0.1, which like you said, it's so weird, not locked at all. And then
they're
just
not like a different. They should at least be a different color, Like, the red ones are 1, the yellow ones are 0.1.
yeah, they're just in there next to each other, and it's like, yeah, I get it. You should stop, look at the label, make sure what it is before you inject it. But if you're in a super big hurry, it'd be nice, when someone's having a cardiac arrest, it'd be nice if they were a little bit better delineated than that. But he's adamant that he did not make a mistake, and she says, obviously you could have made a mistake. And it's another thing where it's like House doesn't want to admit that he could be wrong kind of thing. And them claiming, oh, you're probably wrong, even though he's almost literally never wrong.
Right.
So, yeah, so they say that's the reason, is because of that. And he thinks that there's an underlying condition that caused her to have a cardiac arrest. So it's more than just an allergic reaction, that there's something else there. So that's what they start testing for.
And Cuddy actually brings it up. She says, well, if you use the wrong needle and gave her the wrong dosage and caused a cardiac arrest, I have to report it to the lawyers who we saw in the previous episode.
Yep.
And the lawyer guy, I hope he's the same one they keep using because he cracks me up. He's just he's almost like Tommy in The Godfather, where he just has no sense of humor whatsoever. He's just very matter of.
Yeah, I do think we see him a time or two again, but I have to warn you that at some point he gets replaced by a different lawyer.
Well, that sucks.
Who becomes somewhat prominent in some of the storylines, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot of ethical dilemmas on the show, like in last week, the maternity episode where they had to decide which baby to kill.
Yeah, exactly. Do we go with the normal heterosexual one or the or the homosexual couples?
I think they missed something. They should have called that one House's Choice.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, so this lady is a nun. We learn about I guess she's been in the order for basically her whole life, is what they say. Mm-hmm. But then they're kind of weird. Some of the nuns are kind of shit talking her. This one lady's oh, she's always getting headaches and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
to get out of chores and.
Yeah, she's really. They're very snipey with each other.
Yeah, I actually like the way they portrayed them. It wasn't some super devout. I mean, they were devout, but it wasn't they actually really humanized the nuns. Which obviously there's a big atheist bent to the show with House being probably one of the first prominent atheist protagonists that I can think.
Yeah, and what I like about that is they're not in your face with it. There are a couple episodes where he directly kind of addresses it. But for the most part, it's just something that informs his character. The fact that he's an atheist is just something that informs his character and not something that he's shouting from the rooftops all the time. It's just, it's there, kind of thing.
And so, and I don't know anything about I don't know if David Shore is also an atheist and that's why he made House one or what, but I mean, I feel that they treat the, the nun and their whole, part of the episode, they're very humane. It's very well done, I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
They're very humane, they're like humans. They're not oh, we're perfect issues. And they're funny. The Mother Superior, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
like the HBIC is what they call her too. But she's like real fun. You know, she's joking with them.
Yeah.
House and her, get along.
Yep. It's funny because no, it is true too. If you got, I mean, no offense to women, but if you got a bunch of women together, living together all the time, I mean, there's going to be gossip going around about each other.
I mean, let's be fair, men as well. I mean,
Yeah,
I've
that's
worked,
true.
with all men, and they've been just as gossipy as the reputation women get. But yeah, I think in general, I think science and logic, but not the modern social agenda, would say that women are more socially aggressive than men are for sure.
Yeah, and I think like you said, I like that. Even the snipey nun, when they were talking to her, she was like, yeah, if I break my leg, I think that I broke my leg for a reason. God wanted me to break my leg, but also that he wants me to put a cast on it, to go to a doctor, to do this
Right.
stuff. They're like you said, they're very
Sensible. They're not
Yeah.
just like these like wacky let's not if you we're not going to get into it because we're not a religious show, but there's wacky like negative things you could certainly focus on other than like they're kind of bitchy to each other.
Yeah. I do like the line too when she says she believes in things that aren't real, and House says, "Isn't that kind of a job requirement?"
Right, yeah. Like you said earlier, it's not like in your face, but he's like kind of like a snarky, like well, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. But so yeah, they start treating her with the prednisone, and they give her.
And then Val Kilmer bursts in and wheels it off, going, "I got you, babe." Just kidding. No offense, Iceman.
They give her an MRI, and she complains about the smell. One of the techs, a rare instance where there's an actual tech there.
A
besides
qualified
just
person to do the test.
Yeah, she says.
Do you think that's?
Yeah, go
Do you
ahead.
think that's part of the trouble too? That these people who aren't like ultrasound technicians or radiologists are doing all these tests that they don't really know how to do properly?
Exactly.
Because often in the same episode they'll do the same test later and it's completely different.
Oh yeah, there's an episode later too where somebody needs to get their leg X-rayed or whatever, and Chase does it, and he goes, "Oh, do you notice anything wrong? This is terrible." And the house puts up the two X-rays, and he goes, she's actually got two left feet. We're gonna have to swap everything, back or something like that. And he's like, and he looks at Chase. He's like, "Are you X-rayed the wrong damn leg?" And it's like, yeah, that's gonna happen when you don't, when you send people that aren't qualified.
Right. Yeah, and even in this episode at one point House goes, "Maybe we should do that test again. You might have got it wrong."
But so she complains about the smell in there, and I guess somebody threw up in there. But afterwards, when she's pulled out, she's still complaining about the smell, and then she claims to see Jesus. So she's having both olfactory and visual hallucinations, meaning that, or yeah, delusions, meaning that she's got temporal lobe swelling, and that's when they think it's encephalitis. Just so everyone knows, I know Mike knows, but just so everyone knows out there, the difference between this is some of the stuff that I love about reading about medicine and stuff like that, is these little like tidbits or whatever. But the difference between a hallucination and a delusion, they say this in House later too. A hallucination is when you see something that you know is not real, but you still see it. A delusion is, or you can hear it, or you can smell any of your senses. And a delusion is when you think that it is real. So if you see your dead mother and you know that she's dead, that's a hallucination. Not remembering she died is a delusion. So that's the difference between those two things. But yeah, so she's having delusions, and that's what they
You
diagnose.
kind of get a little piece of her character here too, because she's very like kind of afraid. She's like, "Oh, I see Jesus," and like she seems like she's not quite certain that she's done the right thing. She's like, "Oh, forgive me," or something like that.
Yeah, I guess we should mention too that at the very beginning, the house mentions to the team that the patient is a nun, and Chase says, "I hate nuns."
Yeah, which is like the first personality. Chase, he hates nuns.
Yep. That's the first thing that we get. So, obviously that's a big red flag for House. House knows that there's something there because it's a weird thing for somebody to say.
Right. But yeah. So and then we get a lot of good Foreman bucking up against House in this one.
Yep, absolutely.
Because as usual, Chase and
Cameron.
Cameron
Right.
are they're like, oh, House is right. I can't remember what, like they're just convinced. Oh, House could never have used the wrong needle. It's impossible.
Yeah,
kinda
Cameron especially. Yeah.
Yeah, and then House is kind of getting some pressure here, so he actually goes into Cuddy's office and he's like, he and Wilson talk about it. He's like, well, I have to prove that this amount of epinephrine was used, and so he kind of documents it. He's like, well, we have to make sure the charts are right. And then Wilson points out, like, well, some of these are your charts, so you just made shit up in these because that's all he does. He just
Yeah, he's very lazy about charting.
right, but yeah, Foreman does. I can't remember what the conflict they have, but House basically goes, well, we're doing this even though you think it's wrong. So what are you going to do about it? And then we see Foreman going to cut.
Yeah, he wants to put her in a hyperbaric chamber, to treat basically autoimmune disease, because they can't use the normal protocols, which would be prednisone, which gave her encephalitis, or antihistamines or anything like that, which she had an allergic reaction to. So they have to use this.
Right, at this point, they just point out that her immune system is just like wiped out. Like they don't know what it is. Like Cuddy says, oh, it's a prednisone, but then Cameron,
yeah,
she says, oh, no, 2 doses of prednisone wouldn't destroy your immune system like this, which I agree with. True.
Yeah, I agree with her. I mean, I guess it's possible if you used high enough doses, but I don't know. I mean, prednisone is not prednisone's a good steroid for autoimmune diseases, but it's not even like the strongest steroid they use. So that's, I don't know.
And actually, with what you told me about Cameron, how she's an immunologist, that actually makes sense because she's obviously the most qualified person to tell whether it would do that or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like that it makes sense before we even discover that that's her specialty.
Yep.
Another thing in this episode that I like to point out is we don't quite get the phrase that we named this podcast after, but House does have a little soliloquy, very brief, where he's like, well, everybody, he doesn't exactly say everybody lies, but he goes, he says something almost not quite it, but he's very close to it. He basically has a theory that everyone just makes shit up. I mean, that's the premise of the show, and it's really at the core of the show. I mean, he's basically saying, I'm using Occam's razor, I'm using logic. Everyone, people lie to themselves, to each other. I'm going to be the bright blade of truth that cuts through all these lies.
Exactly. Yeah, he doesn't trust anyone or anything other than what he can discover through evidence and logic.
Exactly, and that's a great part about the show. It's fun. I mean, I like it. I'm a rational type person, atheist, that sort of thing. I love that the character, is really, adheres to the core of his beliefs that, there's a truth and I'll find the truth, and I'm not going to believe the truth someone else has sought out. I mean, obviously to a degree he's a doctor. He didn't discover all of his medical knowledge on his own, I would hope.
Yeah, exactly.
Once these have been tested, reliable, proven methods. But I mean, so he knows that he just has to deal with the bullshit of the world. He just has to discard to find what's actually wrong.
Yeah, and I like that he's the only one like that, first of all, in the show. And I like that he's surrounded by people that are part of the minutia and the bullshit of life, that all the kind of drama stuff and relationship stuff and everything throughout the whole course of the series, most all that comes from them. And he's like this calm in this storm. I like the juxtaposition of the two things. I think it works really well in this show for the most part when the show's going well.
Yeah, and even though he's an asshole, we basically, as far as I can tell, House does not lie, unlike everybody else in the show. We always know, that's why people like him. He's like this complete asshole, piece of shit, reckless, genius. But I mean, he doesn't bullshit you. He's not going to lie to anybody. He's not even when he goes into the nuns at the beginning of the episode, he's still popping, Oxycontin or whatever. You said it's Vicodin, right?
Vicodin, yeah.
He's just popping them like candy in front of the nuns. He does not care. He's always himself. He's always true to himself.
Yeah, so he goes to like you said, he goes to the HBIC and
Oh,
and
actually, I forgot to mention, kind of important. This is a Christmas episode,
yeah, that's true. It's the first Christmas episode.
and there's a funny joke where they have candy canes, and the house is like, "Oh, canes, what's that supposed to mean?" And
Right.
there's like a very awkward silence
Yeah,
because
'cause-
that's like House's the first joke he really.
And Cameron brings them in, so she's all like frozen with fear because she's the one that would most care what he thinks.
Right.
And he's like, "Relax, I'm just joking." But yeah, so House goes to the Mother Superior and is talking about her, and she's like, to your point, she says, "Why didn't you talk to her?" And he goes, "In my experience, if you want to know something about somebody, talking to that someone is the least successful way to do it."
Right.
And so he kind of intimates about like things she might be lying about and everything. And she goes, "Oh, you've been talking to I can't remember her name, but and he says, "Yeah." So she gives him some tea. They're talking, and he says, "Do all of you lie?" And he says, "I know she wasn't here her whole life." And he said,
Because she kind of leaks out her history, and the other nuns do, and it doesn't really make perfect sense at all. I mean, it's like they're basically telling different versions of a lie. Like it's slightly.
yeah, exactly. Because her parents died when she was 6, and then she was raised by the orphanage, and according to them, she's been there her whole life. But when House had to, open her blouse and everything, he noticed that she had a tattoo on her shoulder,
And also very nice breasts, he says.
yeah, exactly. And so, he knows that she hasn't been in there the whole time. So she says that the Mother Superior says that when she was, I think, 15 or 12, no, 12.
Yeah.
When she was 12, she left or she ran away. And then she
I
came
think she was
back.
like an abusive household, is what they said.
Yeah. And then she came back when she was 15 and still was in the church ever since. So for 3 years, she, in her formative years, she was out on the street. And House takes a sip of
And
the
the
tea.
HBIC says she even had an abortion, like shortly before she came back into the fold.
Exactly. That was one of the motivations, I think, for her coming back.
What you give is a nice humanizing touch, I mean, obviously Catholics are, very strongly against abortion for the
Right.
most part, not every single one, but, the nuns who are so, nunny that they go to the super nun fortress where they can't even, like, have TV.
Exactly.
Even they will accept, even they accept.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But so he drinks the tea and he's like, "Oh, this is really good tea." And he has this like knowing smile on his face because he knows something's up with it. And I can't remember what was in the tea, some sort of root. But
Yeah, that actually is kind of, there are some teas that, like, especially herbal teas, that if you don't check them out properly, there are stuff that, especially if you have, like, a pre-existing condition, it can really mess you up.
yeah. So the reason that she had the cardiac arrest, and she, they point out, or they don't point out, but throughout the episode you can see that she's drinking this tea, and she even drinks the tea with the antihistamine to wash
Yeah,
the antihistamine down.
I think after the last episode, especially, they're certainly tricking us on this, because the whole time I'm like, oh, the tea, is very prominently, but pretty subtle, like the teddy bears from last episode. But it's a
Yeah.
little more overt. It's like, oh, it's the tea for sure. And even House thinks it's.
Yeah, and he says basically, this root in the tea, if you combine it with even 0.1 of epinephrine, then then it causes cardiac arrest. So if you take cardiac arrest off the table, then all that's left is an allergic reaction from something. We don't know what, but she's having an allergic reaction from something. And we forgot to point out that Cuddy pulls him off the case, saying the very dramatic line, "I'm going to do the biggest favor one doctor can do for another. I'm going to prevent you from killing your patient." And when he finds out about this tea, because obviously House can't let it go, so he continues to investigate even after he's been pulled off the case. He says the same words back to her. He hoists her by her own petard.
Right.
So he explains all that it's an allergic reaction, but her immune system is severely compromised, and they don't know what's causing the allergic reaction. So they put her in a clean room, where Chase is talking to her, and we get a little more character development from Chase. Basically, Chase is saying to her that, you're being tested right now by God. Basically, he
Right, and then
yeah. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say he said that he admits that he went to seminary school in the past, but decided to leave seminary, and that's when he went into medicine.
Yeah, and then that's when he tells her, he goes, yeah, my favorite verse is about, God testing you to see, whether or not you really believe or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, like you said, makes her, like, the next thing we see is she's trying to, like, get a medical release. She's trying to leave without, against medical advice, essentially.
Yeah, because she just wants to go back to, the monastery, and she's just like, she basically says, if God wants me to die, then it doesn't matter where I am, and if I'm going to live, then I'll live, no matter where I am. Basically, is what her
Right.
attitude is. Because, and as Chase says, I think I'm the one that convinced her to leave, because she wants to prove that she has faith in God and God's plan. She asks Chase why he left the order, and he says, that test, you passed it and I failed. Basically saying, I don't have faith.
Yeah, and then, unlike House, his whole team seems to have some sort of religious belief. I know Foreman, says he thinks, whatever House says is ridiculous or something
Yeah.
like that. But
It's another way that he's similar to House, but different from House. Because he never comes out and says, professes any sort of deep religious beliefs throughout the entire series. But, there's hintings there that, through the way he was raised and everything, that he has some sort of religious beliefs. Chase definitely does. Cameron says she's an atheist in this episode, somewhat casually, and then Foreman says you're not even a little bit agnostic. But then there are other episodes where she kind of changes her mind about that. So she's a little more fluid in her belief system, I guess.
yeah,
than
more
everyone
like
else.
agnostic, maybe. I'm not sure.
But so she, Chase is in there with her, and she starts to have an allergic reaction again in the clean room. And he's like, "Hey, get in here. Let's go." And this is the one part where Chase is actually the competent one. They're starting to scrub up and everything, which I mean they should. But Chase says, she's having an allergic reaction. Just get in here and screw the protocols. And Foreman's like, she's in a clean room, and Chase goes, "Are you kidding me right now? Just get in here."
Right.
So they get in there, and House now realizes that they've looked everywhere for any kind of allergen. The one place they haven't looked is inside of her. It has to be something inside her.
This was definitely a there's a moment in every show. The last one was when last one was with the virus or whatever, and you saw the lady sneezing.
Yeah.
There was someone said something about God inside you, and right when they said, I'm like, oh shit, that's the moment, because there's always an aha,
Yep.
cathartic, a release kind of episode, at the
Exactly.
very end of the episode, where you're like, okay, they haven't found what it is. The whole house is like, wait a second, backgammon.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
So yeah, they kind of find out somehow that she was on a birth control at one point. So they do another test, which how their other test didn't catch this, I don't know. But I think we discussed it earlier that they're all incompetent at taking these tests.
Yeah, they do a full body scan, basically.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess they just did the head in the MRI. I don't know.
I guess I'm not sure. Although it's funny because if they did an MRI, I'm not sure. Copper's a ferrous metal, isn't it? It's I guess
Yeah.
Is it
It conducts,
magnetic?
it conducts electricity. It's super. I mean, you can put a penny on a magnet.
Yeah, so being that close, I mean, I know that
Yeah,
part
wouldn't
of
it
her,
rip it out of her body?
it should have produced some sort of pain. It should have moved it at least a little bit. That's not a small amount of copper.
No, what I thought was funny about that was the house instantly recognizes it as a very particular type of birth control that was used in the 80s.
Yeah, the copper
He's
cross.
like, the copper cross.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of funny. I mean, did she pick that one because she was Catholic? I don't know.
Right. I knew I laid many a lady that were on the copper cross.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, she's got this in there, and she has an allergy to copper, which
Yeah, because House mentions very early in the episode that you can slowly develop an allergy, which is they think it's dish soap when she first has her dermatitis or whatever.
yeah. And what it was is they got new copper pots, and that combined with the copper already inside of her body, I guess, just pushed her over the edge to having an allergic reaction to it. So that's the diagnosis.
They actually did that pretty perfectly too, because the one nun who was sniping about her said like, "Oh, she always says she's not feeling well," which were basically all the symptoms of the allergic reaction that like she kind of seems like she always had, but the one nun just thought she was faking.
Yeah, and just slowly over the time it developed. So it does work out that way. So they remove the copper cross, and everything is kind of put back to normal, and then Wilson. Now we get the first hints of some personality from Wilson too, because they Wilson and House are talking, and Wilson says, "Hey, do you want to come over for Christmas dinner?" House says, "You're Jewish," and he says, "Hanukkah dinner then. Who gives a fuck?" You can tell Wilson is Jewish, quote unquote, more by, I guess, heritage than anything else, because he certainly does not practice.
He mentioned that in the last episode too. Like he's like, "Oh yeah, Jews eat ham." He's like, "How'd you not go to medical school?" He says to Foreman without learning anything about Judaism.
Right. So he says, "Well, maybe I can come over," and House says, "Your wife won't mind." And then he's like, "I don't want to talk about it." And so it's...
Yeah, at first he says, "Oh, I'm a doctor. She's used to me not being there on Christmas." But he's like, "Yeah, I don't want to talk about it."
Yeah, so there's some trouble going on in the Wilson household, which is a kind of reoccurrent theme. So that'll be interesting to explore. But we get the first kind of Wilson's not good with relationships. I mean, good with friendships, but not really good with relationships.
Yeah, I like how they give like little sprinklings of personality. Like they don't like give a full blown like Chase episode or Wilson like, "Oh, my wife." I mean, maybe they do it later, but they just like kind of like slowly tell you more about the characters. It's like a nice procedural that they kind of like develop the characters as they go along. I mean, I guess they do that in like other shows, but it's very like well done in this show, I think.
Yeah, there are episodes that focus more on one character than another, I suppose. But unless I'm mistaken, I'm sure I am. I'm sure there's probably one or two, but I don't remember any episodes that are specifically just this is about whomever, and like most all the elements are focused around that character. I don't really think they do that. I think it's more just sprinkled in here and there with House and everyone else. Really, I mean, we probably learn more about House than any of the other characters, but we get to know the other characters pretty well too. So, but yeah, another good episode. I think season 1 continues to be good. I can see why this show had a lot of early fans, and was able to get to a second season.
Yeah, for sure. It's good, and I saw as long as I watched it, it was good. But it went on a lot longer after I stopped watching it.
Yeah, well, it will get bad. Don't worry. A few down the line, it'll be a while down the line, but a while down the line, we'll have a lot of fun making fun of it. Some episodes will almost be another dumpster diving, I think. But yeah, it's it stays good for a while for sure. But that's our episode for the week. Do all the things I said at the beginning. Subscribe on iTunes. That helps us out a lot. And tell friends about the show. Anyone that you know that likes House. And if you want to hear anything in particular about House, if you want us to go over the likelihood of a diagnosis or something like that, we are not medically trained professionals, but I have Google, so if you want to do that,
if you have any medical questions, we could probably look them up for you.
Yeah, I'll go to WebMD, just like all of you could, and regurgitate whatever WebMD says, and then maybe call an actual doctor.
Exactly.
But anyway, so we will see you next week. Bye.
See you next time.